Good morning, bonjour. We're going to be starting at 10:30, and it is being published, it's being live on the internet, so invite you to have a coffee, or if you need headsets for translation, but we'll be starting in a few minutes. Thank you. We're live. Bonjour. Welcome to the 4th annual public meeting of PPP Canada. I welcome the people here who are present. I also welcome people who are on the website watching the annual public meeting. Before I start, I would like to present the executive team that are here with us. I have Greg Smith, who is our CFO, and we have Mike Mills, who is our Vice President of Investment, and we have Carole Beaulieu, notre vice-président de développement de projet. Like I said, the annual public meeting is being broadcast live through our website. We will be asking them at the end of the session if they have questions, so they'll be active participators to the annual public meeting. There is kits available that have the agenda, and our annual public report annual report has been published and is available. I would ask that you refrain or turn off your electric device, just to make it not interrupt the session. We will begin the meeting with remarks from Tony Comper. Mr. Comper will provide an overview of PPP Canada activities in 12-13 and report on the corporation's results and financial position. Mr. Comper was appointed as one of our board directors in 2009, right from the beginning of the operation of the corporation, and he was appointed our chair of the board in March 2013. He is the former president and CEO of the Bank of Montreal Financial Group and currently serves as a director on a number of corporations, including Spectra Energy Corporation, the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, and the Canadian Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center of Holocaust Studies. His past experience includes serving as the chair of the University of Toronto Governing Council and chair of the C.D. Howe Institute. Mr. Comper has degrees from Mont Saint-Vincent University, the University of New Brunswick, and HAFA University with an honorary law degree from the University of Toronto. Following Mr. Comper's presentation, we will have Mr. John McBride, who's the CEO of PPP Canada. He was appointed also right from the beginning in 2009 as the CEO. And also we're happy to report that the government has renewed his CEO for another 5 years. So the staff is very pleased about that. Well, you're supposed to applaud. That's the staff. John McBride will discuss PPP Canada's role in advancing government policy, our position as the center of expertise for PPP P3s with the federal government, and review the state of the Canadian P3 market. Mr. McBride held significant other senior positions in the government, such as the Executive Vice President of the Canadian International Development Agency. He was also the President and CEO of the Canadian Commercial Corporation. He was a senior executive, held significant senior executive position in Industry Canada, Treasury Board Secretariat, the Department of Finance, and also with the Australian government. Fait que sans plus tarder, j'invite Monsieur Tony Comper, our chair of our board, to do the presentation.
Merci, Carole. Bonjour tout le monde. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de me présenter. As Carol said, je suis Tony Comper. I'm the president of the board of P3 Canada. And I'm very, very happy to welcome everyone here to our annual meeting. This is several years we've done this now, so it's getting to be a little bit of an old hat. But we have lots to talk about and lots to share with you in terms of the progress that we've made over the last year. And I'd just also like to mention that we're very fortunate to have several of our board members here with us today. Jacques Lamar, stand up, Jacques, please. Carol Pennycook, Bill McMacken, who's chair of our audit committee. Thanks very much. So let's get going. I'm going to try to be brisk because I think the meat of what we're going to be talking about this morning is more in John's comments. So I'm just going to skip over our purpose, our priorities, our governance, and our corporate excellence. I just want to say start off by saying that the whole rationale for P3 Canada actually was the brainchild of Jim Flaherty, recently deceased, and was a great supporter of us, and it was his idea, founded in part on his experience of how to do several things and accomplish several things that can't necessarily be done within the strict context of formal public servants and things of that nature. And he looked at, and by the way, the concept is not new. It's very, very active in the province of Ontario, the province of British Columbia, but it was Jim's perception that the whole concept of P3 Canada and the whole concept of the public-private partnerships was not so much bringing private funds into building public infrastructure, but more the concept of transferring risk from federal and provincial and indeed municipal civil servants into the private sector. And therefore having more guarantee that there would be value for money, that it would be well spent, and that the risk transfer would be very effective. And so that was kind of the concept behind it. And we started off, and as you can see on the slide here, I'm not going to go through reiterating the slides, you can see all that. But I think we've made very good progress over the last 5 years in terms of expanding the concept into other provinces that were not as well developed in terms of having the concept of public-private partnerships as part of their fabric, and also municipalities. And the list of projects that keep coming is very successful. And as I said, the whole purpose was the delivery of public infrastructure by achieving better value, timeliness, and accountability to taxpayers through P3s. There is an argument to be made, several people make this argument, that isn't it more expensive because can't the public sector in fact, borrow money and finance activities more cheaply than you could do it through the private sector. And that's true to a point, except that when we see the example of how many procurement activities that are done within the context of the civil service, in fact, don't achieve their objectives or do overruns and things of that nature, when you add that math back into the equation, it kind of makes whatever funding differential there might be kind of get paid to. So our priorities are fairly straightforward. Building the expertise, which I think John and his team have done a very good job doing. Broadening the P3 engagement across the country on capital projects, and not just at the provincial and municipal level, but increasingly over the last couple of years on terms of big government projects. And we're very heavily involved in, for example, the new bridge that's going into Montreal and the putative bridge that's going to go across into Detroit, if that ever gets off the road. But more to come on that. Anyway, we're very involved in those projects. This is our sterling board of directors, as you can see. Peter Armstrong from Vancouver, Rick Byers from Toronto, Jacques Lamar, who heads the investment committee, Bill McMacken, who chairs the audit committee, and Carol Pennycook. And you can just see the way in which we kind of run the board. We have an audit committee, we have which Bill is the chair, Bill McMacken. We have the governance and HR committee, of which I chair, and we have the investment committee that Jacques Lamar chairs. I'm not going to go through all the details. People are pretty familiar with what audit committees do. We're very fortunate to have an experienced practitioner like Bill McMacken chair our audit committee. And I'll go to the punchline on this in a moment. But when I talk about the financial results, you should know that P3 Canada always gets a clean audit. In part, that's attributable to not just to Bill, but our Chief Financial Officer, who kind of run a pretty tight ship. The Governance and HR Committee, fairly straightforward in terms of what we do. In fact, one of the important activities of the Governance and HR Committee is the evaluation of our Chief Executive Officer. And we put a lot of energy into doing that. And there are some government requirements, by the way, that go into defining the objectives and specifying the performance levels and things of that nature. And we put a lot of energy into that. We also go through a fairly elaborate, and we'll be doing it again this year, board self-evaluation, where the board members, in fact, comment on the effectiveness of the different committees, the effectiveness of individual directors, and we get a lot of good feedback on that. The investment committee, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, because this is where we actually look at individual projects and we look at how we're investing the fund that the Government of Canada has given us to co-invest along with other partners on that domain. Here's the punchline I was saying, and this is a credit to Bill and to our Chief Financial Officer and to John, that the financial statements present fairly the financial position of the corporation, and this is the P3 Canada's 6th successive unqualified opinion in its 6-year audit history, and that's a real credit. Financial position, appropriation is $150,000 less than last year due to actions undertaken in response to the government's strategic and operating review. As you know, the federal government has been kind of looking at all its activities and looking at the value for money and looking at how we can achieve significant savings. And this is just kind of a snapshot of the P3 Canada Fund and where the investments have been made. I think we do a pretty good job, and I think this is a credit to the management team in terms of human resource management and looking at risk-based stewardship of resources and leadership in enterprise risk management. And in fact, I think we've got a pretty good track record in terms of the investments that we have made, in terms of the value for money that we're generating for the government. And that kind of concludes my remarks, and now I'd like to introduce our Chief Executive Officer, John McBride, who's going to regale us with some of the things that have happened this year and how we're doing.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci pour avoir pris le temps d'être avec nous, de nous donner une opportunité de vous parler un peu de nos résultats, nos plans, nos pensées sur l'avenir de la corporation. Thanks all for joining us, taking the time out to be with us here today. This is an important annual public meeting for me because this is 5 years. We've been 5 years in operation, and it's sort of an interesting time to take stock on where we've been, because we've had our first 5-year fund, and we're now sort of planning sort of the next 5 years and where to take it to the next level. So it's an opportunity for me to talk a bit about what I think we've achieved in the first 5 years and share with you, what does the next 5 years hold for you. As Tony mentioned, infrastructure is very important to Canadians. All right? You forget, you turn the tap on and water, how you get to work, it's critical. And governments, you hear it all the time, governments are investing vast amounts of money in infrastructure. And our business is trying to help them spend that in a way that delivers better results. And I think we've done that over the last 5 years. P3s are a product of lessons we've learned from the past. I mean, we have learned lessons from how infrastructure has been delivered. What have been the problems? And what can we learn from the problems of the past and take into this? One of the problems has always been you don't get what you pay for. Right? That, there's a cost overrun, time delays. How do we fix that? You've paid the money and they don't deliver what it is that you want. Well, P3s fix that by paying by performance. And if you don't pay people until they deliver, that means they have to raise their own money to deliver the project. So not only if you're building a road do you not have to pay them until they deliver, but they've got to go and raise that money themselves. The due diligence that comes with somebody, you go to a financier and sort of say, by the way, can you lend me $500 million? People pay attention when they have $500 million. I mean, these principles, we all kind of know, we practice them in our own life. How can we translate them into government procurement? Whole life cycle, We over-design, overbuild, under-maintain. Things are falling apart. We see that every day in our lives. And how do you make it so that you have whole life cycle considerations? And P3s do that by incorporating design, build, operating, and maintain all into one contract. And how do we let the private sector innovate? Because we know, as I tell people, the classic example is our friends at DND, and I don't mean to use them, but, will tell you exactly how big they want the bolt on the ship when they really meant they wanted the ship to float, right? And so how do we start specifying what we want rather than detailed specifications on the how? So those lessons have sort of led to sort of the knowledge of P3s and led to our creation. Because as Minister Flaherty sort of saw that, we need to do infrastructure differently, and P3s are a way of doing them differently. They're not a tool that you're going to use all the time, but they're a tool that you're going to use some of the time, but they're different. They require a different type of expertise. And so our creation is about creating that expertise to help all levels of government. And there's many PPP Canada employees in this room today, and it's their expertise that is the success story of our last 5 years. And sharing that expertise and bringing that expertise to all levels of government is really what it is that we're about. I can talk a bit about the market context, because we're doing this in a context of the market. Talk a bit about that expertise, because that expertise, that knowledge development that we're doing is the lifeblood of our organization. And then who are we doing it with? What are we trying to do with the federal government to get them more in the business of using P3s as a tools, with provinces, municipalities, and territories, and then a bit of a look back of how far we've come in the last 5 years. Market context. If you go back and read Budget 2011, I think, it says Canada aspires to be a global leader in P3s. Well, I'd say 3 years later, It's no longer an aspiration, that Canada is a global leader in P3s. The model that Canada is using is recognized internationally. You know, we cover this. I mean, and that's I wouldn't want to say that's all because of PPP Canada. We've played our part, but we have lots of partners across Canada at the provincial and other levels that have made Canada a global leader in P3s. And we see that in the people that come to visit us. We get delegations from across the globe who want to come in and say, how is it that Canada has done this? You know, how is it that you've managed to do the things that we talk about but haven't been able to achieve? So, you know, we do a lot of our work in Canada, but it's getting recognition internationally. And why is that? You know, I've done 5 bullets. There's more than 5, but it's good to remember. One is, and this, we focus on value for money. All right? P3s are a tool to achieve value for money. P3s are not an ideological kind of thing that we're trying to push. We do them only when they achieve value for money, not for budget accounting purposes, not for, if you do them for the right reason, and we require detailed analysis, because not all projects will produce value for money as a P3, and we want to make sure that we're focused only. If you do them for the right reason, you'll get the right result. That's not the story internationally. I mentioned that it requires specialized skills, and Canada has created specialized agencies to have that specialized skill to help the public sector deliver on P3s. Strong capital markets. You know, Canada is one of the few countries that's been able to continue to close projects right through the financial crisis. And spreads are back under 200 basis points, around 200 basis points, and there is capital available in efficient ways to deal with these things. Strong legal frameworks, ownership, allocations, contract law, they provide a strong foundation. And not only have we drawn expertise from around the world to Canada, but Canadian companies are also experts in this kind of business. So we have all of the winning conditions to make Canada a global leader in P3s. And we're seeing the market grow, right? It is solid and diversified, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go along. The market used to be very much dependent on the provincial provinces of Ontario and British Columbia, but we're seeing more and more players in the market and more sectors. That's a slide that nobody's able to read, but it basically is showing that it's coming from all places, provinces, municipalities, in different forms, in different places, different sectors. We have seen over the last 5 years a significant change in the Canadian pipeline of P3s. You know, that's an interesting bullet, because that's one of our main performance objectives is, can we get new things in the market? So half of all projects coming in the market are from jurisdictions that are new to the P3 model. That's an amazing statistic in a very short time. And, you know, the municipal market 5 years ago, you know, basically didn't exist. I mean, there were some isolated projects. 80% of the new entrants are municipalities. And new provinces, right? When we started 5 years ago, the province of Saskatchewan had never done a P3. They now have $3 billion of projects in the market in P3, and we're participants in a fair number of those. And as I said, municipalities has been a significant emphasis of what we've been doing, and we're beginning to see the results in the market. And different sectors, right? You know, 5 years ago, the health sector, you know, justice sector, and road sector comprised almost all of the P3s. Now we're starting to see water and wastewater. We have done affordable housing. So the model's starting to expand, partly with our help, to new players and to new sectors. That's a bit of the results of what we've achieved, and we'll talk more about it in detail later on, what we've achieved with our first $1.2 billion and with our expertise. Looking ahead, you know, not only will we have another 5 years of our PPP Canada fund, but the new Building Canada plan requires that all projects over $100 million be assessed. So the federal government has achieved a lot, and has, I think, demonstrated to everybody its commitment to P3s even more across all of its programming. I mentioned expertise, right? Knowledge, knowing how to do a P3. Like, people say, well, P3s, you know, can they achieve value for money? Absolutely, they can achieve value for money. Not in all circumstances, but in order for them to achieve value for money, you need to know which projects make good P3s. You need to know how to develop and structure P3s. You need to know how to effectively procure them, and you need to know how to effectively manage them. And that's not a skill set that's widely available at all levels of government. And so that underpins what it is that we do at PPP Canada. We aspire to be global experts on P3s. And we aspire to share that knowledge with all levels of government so that P3s can be a tool that all levels of government can use effectively to deliver infrastructure. And that's a challenging thing, because 5 years ago we were brand new. We were just learning. We were just getting started. So aspire to be global leaders in P3s doesn't sound very humble when you're just getting started. But we're well into this, and over the next 5 years, we plan to sort of take it up a notch, right? I think that we are one of the leading agencies in the country now. We have over $10 billion worth of project experience. But we plan to sort of be the leading agency, and credit to the Government of Canada for giving us the resources to be able to invest in moving knowledge beyond where it is now on P3s. And we're doing some of those kinds of things. You know, we're working with academic institutions on developing curriculum for people who want to do. We're doing case studies so that people can see. We're moving beyond the sort of development and structuring into what happens during operations. So we're looking at case studies on those kinds of things. We're looking at new sectors. We've put out a sector study already on water and wastewater, and today or already we're releasing our study on energy from waste. So we're helping people to sort of understand how can you apply P3s in different sectors, and we're bringing in doing those kind of studies. We're bringing in people that have practical experience on them. We're bringing in the private sector to help us share with others that expertise. Costing guides, screening assessment tools, procurement templates. We've refreshed our website, and I encourage you all to go there as the beginning of a framework that people can come and access tools. All of these things, all of these knowledge products, we plan to share with everybody for free and make them as accessible as possible. Knowledge is only useful. We have no aspirations to be an organization that produces reports that go on the shelf, right? Our knowledge is only useful if it helps deliver better P3s. And so we work with all levels of government to do that. And over the last 5 years, it's been a significant effort, starting really after Budget 2011, to try and bring P3s to the federal government so the federal government can walk the talk of P3s. And we've done that in a systematic way, one phase at a time, right? So first is upfront, are we identifying opportunities for P3s at the federal level? So the government had put in place a requirement that all large projects over $100 million be assessed for P3 suitability. And so we are doing that in partnership with the Treasury Board Secretariat, because as part of their process of review, they're looking for that. So credit to them and the work we do together to make sure that P3s are at least thought about as a tool. So that's part of our business, and we work with all federal departments to do that. And we've done a number of those over the last year. If it is a viable option, we'll work with people to develop and structure their projects. You know, developing a business case, a P3 business case, to sort of systematically analyzes the issues, to make sure that it will in fact produce value for money, but to actually form the basis of project implementation as you address some of those issues, is a critical input to success on a P3. And we have stepped that up. We've gone from reviewing business cases prepared by others to make sure that they can sort of, Treasury Board, Secretariat, and others can have assurance that they were well done, to actually developing them ourselves. And I think that's even a greater value-added tool to departments where we can actually work with them to deliver P3s. Identifying a P3 and structuring and developing a P3 doesn't get you a P3. You got to actually procure one, right? And the procurement process for a P3 is significantly different than traditional procurement. And a huge change in the last year. We are up to our eyeballs engaged in the procurement of the new bridge over the St. Lawrence in Montreal. It's a quarter of organization, and half of my executive team is 100% devoted to the success of that project. A critical change to our organization that we are now operating on all phases of our federal business. We're identifying, we're developing and structuring, and now we're procuring. And I think it's demonstrated to us and hopefully to our clients that we have a value add across all three parts of that business. And more to come. You know, we are working we're developing a pipeline. So we're now working on the business case for the Detroit River International Crossing. And I expect that at next year's annual public meeting, we'll be talking about the beginning of how far we're into the procurement of that project. And underpinning all of that is sharing with our federal colleagues tools that are tailored to the federal environment. Because those of you who in this room work in the federal government know that it has its own unique aspects. And so working with our colleagues at the Treasury Board Secretariat and Public Works, developing templates, and continuing to educate, right, and build awareness about P3s across, through CFOs, through deputies, and through just delivering sort of broader awareness of what's a P3. It's funny how many people think that they know what a P3 is, but spending time actually taking them through the process is very important. But it's not just the federal government we're working. We talked a bit about provinces, territories, municipalities, and First Nations. Can you bring P3s? How can we help all levels of government? Right? It is the Constitution means we can't tell them, so we encourage them. Right? We encourage them with the fund, and as I mentioned earlier, not only through our own fund, which is focused on bringing new. Right, moving out the boundaries of P3, but the government, as of April of this year, has added in, not only are we going to move the boundaries, but we're going to focus on the existing, and that means for the new Building Canada Fund, which is a significant amount of money, and we're into that business already, screening all projects over $100 million. We have, I know it's actually 25 projects, but I'm supposed to say 22 projects because some of them have yet to be announced. But our first $1.2 billion, across the country, small, large, over $6 billion of infrastructure. And what's not on that thing, over $800 million of value added through the P3 method. So we have our $1.2 billion has achieved over $6 billion of infrastructure and over $800 million of savings, which is a pretty impressive list. And it wasn't easy, all right? After year 2, we had committed about $125 million, right? P3s are projects that take time to identify, to develop, to structure, to procure. But the team has really accelerated its work, and I'm very pleased to say as of March 31st, we had completely committed our first $1.2 billion. But as you see, that curve goes up significantly after the first 2 years. And that happened last year. We more last year. Those projects are Regina, Hamilton, St. John, the province of Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, all in the last year, and Calgary joined our fold in July. We're getting focused in on a number of sectors. As our priorities, we're focusing in on things that generate jobs and economic growth. And for us, that's transportation of all sorts, water and wastewater, and solid waste disposal. It doesn't mean that we won't consider other things, but those are the things that we are getting in terms of priority as our focus. And we're doing a better job of educating our clients because we're getting applications in those areas. The gray is the most interesting, right? So we are getting significant interest from municipalities, right? And they're becoming a dominant portion. And you see from round 1, that gray just has grown significantly as we've been trying to focus in on bringing municipalities into the P3 process. Round 6 just closed in June. So 15 applications. You're going to go, well, that's not a lot of applications. We've learned over the 5 years that, well, the application process is important. The pre-application process is even more important, right? Getting out there, particularly Rob McKay and his team, getting out there, educating clients about what it is we're looking for so that people understand what our program is, and so that we have significantly increased the quality of our applications. And one of the things that we focused on is trying to increase our conversion rate, which is, of projects we screen in, how many of them actually make it. So as we've gotten better at this process, our conversion rate from screening in to actual closure, it has increased by at least 50%. And as you see, that municipality trend continues through round 6. Yeah. And as I mentioned, we started this year, it's a new thing, that the new Building Canada plan has a suitability assessment for P3s. So we've done about half a dozen suitability assessments already. Great partnership has been developed with Infrastructure Canada and sort of a coordinated effort among the two agencies working with other levels of government. Looking back over 5 years, I think we've made significant changes at the federal government, right? P3s were one-offs, right? The RCMP and the CSEC E-Division were one-offs. I think we're getting a more systematic approach to identifying, developing, and now procuring P3s, right? That pipeline, my own view is that we won't have a lot of P3 projects at the federal level, but they'll be big, right? Montreal, Detroit, they'll tend to be fewer but larger. And we've increased project volume, right? We've done that by diversifying the source of projects. So we've changed what's happening at the federal level, and we've changed the market overall. And we've brought new people, right? People that have never been in that business before. And we strongly encourage the full benefits of a P3, right? I talked about whole life cycle and the huge advantages of integrating operating and maintenance into that. So we strongly emphasize DBFM or DBFOM models, and I think we are influencing the nature of the market by doing that. And you'll see, and you'll see how we've been sort of influencing some of those kinds of things. We would never support a DBF, although it's a tool that is through our fund, because we're looking for the very best in P3s, but it is a tool that can be applicable in some circumstances. I mentioned that we have, through our fund overall, realized $861 million of value. Right? So there's some examples of projects, right? Some of them very significant, right? But on average, 12% as the a priori. And I should say, we do value for money assessment up front, but we do it again when we actually receive the bids, so to make sure that our sort of estimates are actually matched up with market reality. You know, sometimes you never know what your clients think of you, right? And one of the things that we've aspired to be is, you know, do people love us for our money, or do they actually love us for our expertise? And I think the truth is they love us for both reasons. But it's really encouraging to say, you know, that's Stephen Mandel, former mayor. We funded the Edmonton LRT with $250 million. That's a significant amount of money for a very large project. But what the mayor remembered was our expertise, and that's hugely satisfying to me, and I think to the organization, because expertise is what we really want to be known for. Again, you know, we're starting to see clients, you know, see that they don't always appreciate our expertise at the beginning. They do appreciate it at the end. I can tell you that. All of what we've achieved is a testimony to the quality of the board, all right, and the guidance that they have given the organization, to the staff, who many of whom are here today, who are just the most incredible people I've had a chance to work with, and the executive team. So I know that I just wanted to recognize one in particular. Who's been with us since the beginning. Carol. Carol is going to retire in December, or at least that's what she says she's going to do. She has been a pioneer for this organization. She's been the heart and soul, so I just wanted to recognize you.
Thank you, John. Didn't expect that. I'd like to thank both Tony and John for their excellent presentation, and I'm sure it was good learning, good to understand what we do and some of our results. We're going to go now to the question period. Je vous invite à utiliser les microphones pour la traduction. Et Michel Coates, qui est là, va prendre les questions. We'll be taking the questions directly from people participating on the web. So I'm opening the session. If you want to use the mic, introduce yourself and to whom you would like to address your question. Don't be shy.
My name is Miguel. I have a question for Mr. John McBride. I have seen in the news very recently that PPP Canada has collaborated in a project in BC. It's the Cookies hydropower plant with First Nations. Could you please explain the involvement of the corporation in this project?
One of our goals has been trying to engage First Nations in P3s. And I'm very pleased about that project. It's an unusual project for us because it's for a hydroelectric facility, run-of-the-water hydro facility in northern BC. And what we did was we made an equity loan to the Kokish First Nation so that they could be a participant in the consortium on that project. And I think it's very close to substantial completion already, if it hasn't already reached substantial completion. And that will provide a stream of revenues for the First Nation for investing in infrastructure in their own communities. So this will continue to produce benefits for this community for the next 30 years plus. So it's a good news story. Very happy that it's announced today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Come on, Dale, you got a question?
Any other questions?
My name is James. From what I've observed, the P3 model you're promoting seems an awful lot like privatization. Could you elaborate on what the differences are?
Well, privatization actually transfers ownership. P3 does not transfer ownership. Governments retain ownership, they retain control. It's a contractual mechanism to engage the private sector. It is quite distinct from the privatization model. It allows the private sector to be engaged while retaining control and ownership for governments.
Thanks.
Well, I'm Michael Teeter with Forum Equity. I was happy to see that you're working with Treasury Board to try to get some of their policies more amenable to P3s. And if you can't answer this question in its entirety, I wouldn't mind you getting back to me. But I'm thinking of the Treasury Board policies on real property, and particularly the requirement to, in a surplus divestiture, or a strategic divestiture, to sell surplus lands to Canada Lands for redevelopment, and how that affects the ability of the federal government to actually do P3s with property redevelopments that they want to maintain an interest in. So I guess my question is, are you working with Treasury Board on that real property policies, and can you comment on that work?
Well, the Government of Canada is the largest accommodation real property owner in the country, and so many departments are looking at their real property assets and trying to figure out how they can get better value out of them or optimize them. The Canada Lands requirement is really for truly surplus land, so things that are no longer required for them. So there are departments that are looking at how they can use existing lands in a P3 context in better ways. One of, I think, the challenges for us over the next 5 years is developing an even deeper partnership with the real property branch at Public Works, who are the major custodians of those kinds of things, to find opportunities for them to employ the P3 model. They've done it once with the RCMP division, but it's still not a, I think yet a systematic part of what they do. We've talked to Canada Lands about that. I'm not sure that it's Canada Lands that's the impediment to people thinking about P3s and this, or the surplus issue. But I think there remain opportunities, with real property branch, but there are many custodian departments, DND and others, who I think as they start to reinvest and as we start to identify the opportunities through the $100 million screen, will start to emerge in the pipeline of P3 projects.
Great answer. Just one supplementary, I guess. I think one of the problems I still see there is that there's an impediment in the policy to actually bundle the lands. And sometimes in a P3 model, it's much better to bundle it. The government will get better value for money if they actually look at a partnership in its entirety in that bundle, as opposed to saying, well, this portion is surplus, therefore we have to hand it over to someone else. And that'll just make it.
Appreciate the question.
Our participants on the web are very, very quiet. Do you have other questions?
Hi, Greg Jodaway with Pace Public Affairs. I was wondering if a provincial agency is involved, for example, like Infrastructure Ontario, which also has a number of projects under its belt and a number of years of experience. How do you manage who's the procurement lead, especially if the province has financial stake in the project and the feds are coming in with financial stake in the project?
The procurement is undertaken by the owner of the asset. So under the work we do with provinces and municipalities, they're the owners, they're the procurers. All right. So when we're doing sort of a fund, if we're doing take the Regina bypass in Saskatchewan, or a project what we do with Ontario, they're the procurer, but our agreements come with clear conditions on what our expectations are about how they manage it. So our relationship is with the province and the municipality, and their relationship is with the private sector. But we're engaged in the process of their procurement because we establish what we call conditional financial agreements with them that they have to clear before we will pay any money from them. So we review RFQs, we review evaluation criteria, we review project agreements to make sure that the project agreements in fact transfer the risk that was in the business case that we use for approval. But at the end of the day, we're not the signatory on the contract with provinces and municipalities. So who owns the asset drives who's the procuring entity.
Right. Understood. But if I'm looking, for example, at a municipal project where they're getting provincial funding and they're working with Infrastructure Ontario, often Infrastructure Ontario becomes the lead procurement advisor to the municipality. They might have different templates, different clauses, different agreements than P3. So if P3 becomes a partner in that.
Yeah, we want things to be market accepted. So take that example of if it's we're in Ottawa, say the City of Ottawa LRT, where Ottawa is the procurer, Infrastructure Infrastructure Ontario is their procurement advisor. Mm-hmm. If it achieves the goals, we don't dictate that you have to use this set. We focus on the objectives. So, is it a market-tested documentation? So the IO documentation is market-tested, market accepted. Does it in fact transfer the risks that they said that it was going to transfer? I mean, we're not a financial participant in the Ottawa LRT example, but if it was. The City of Surrey is a better example because in the City of Surrey we're doing a waste treatment facility. City of Surrey is the procurer, Partnerships BC is the advisor, and we're a funder. Now we go and participate in the process. We overview what it is that they do. If we're not happy with how they manage it, we will express ourselves on that. But we would not sort of say that you have to use a federal template as long as it's market accepted and market tested.
Understood. It's part of your due diligence as a financier to the project then.
I'm sorry?
It's part of your due diligence as a financial partner.
Part of our due diligence that okay. So a business case is a necessary part of our agreement that we invest in a project. So we will give them, based on their business case and our assessment of their business case, value for money, how they're going to procure, all of those will they follow P3 best practice? We will agree to invest, but we will not issue any payment until such time as we're satisfied about how they will procure. And frankly, we don't generally issue any payment until they've reached substantial completion. But Michael's investment group takes the project from sort of investment ready right through to financial close. And so they participate in the CCMs, they review all our RFQs, RFPs, evaluations, They review the PAs. They're a very busy group these days because we've got lots of things in the market. But we exercise due diligence right through the procurement process. And then Greg's group actually follows the projects right past substantial completion. So we're hands-on on the projects right the way through. And I think the market tells us that that brings market confidence as well. I think that's particularly true when we're working with, and this is part of our main focus, working with jurisdictions that are new to P3s. So as we know and we've learned, the job of executing a great P3 is not done when you've got a great business case. The job is done when the thing is actually built and operating effectively. So it's been a significant change in our business over the last 5 years, because obviously in years 1 and 2, we're very much looking at the front end of projects. Over the last year, we've got how many projects in pre-procurement or procurement phase, Michael? About 10 projects, probably $3 or $4 billion worth in the procurement phase. And so we are working with people on all the time, right through the procurement process, and advising them on that. I mean, it was a challenge at the beginning with people who weren't used to sort of the federal government being involved. You know, it's my job, I shouldn't be involved. But as I think those quotes on the have shown, that people actually have learned to appreciate our value add, and because we're not there to dictate to people how to do it, we're there to maximize the realization of value for money. And with that in mind, you know, it's easy to find sort of, you know, and sometimes you kind of go, well, this is based on our experience, you know, in these other types of projects, and as our portfolio of experience grows, we're able to share that more and more with other jurisdictions.
Thank you.
We have a question from Dale.
Yes, this is a question for you, John. We're heading into an election, it looks like. Federal election. I'm wondering what the effect will be on project approvals and or P3 Canada Fund, if any.
I'd say none. One of the great benefits, two things. One of the great benefits of the organization is that we are arm's length. And I can say, honestly, we've never had anybody sort of say to us, you know, do this project or do that project or do this one fast. And so they've really relied on the expertise of the board and of the organization, nor have they ever turned one down, right? Where they're free to set sectoral priorities, but when it comes to project-specific things, they rely on our advice. I'd also sort of say that, you know, I'm not sure everyone recalls that there was a parliamentary committee that reviewed P3s. And all parties recognized that it's a tool in the toolkit. And I think that's a huge shift in 5 years, that I think there's increasing recognition that P3 is not an ideological debate between those that are for the private sector or for the public sector. It's a question of what is the right approach in any given project, and I think that that's increasingly getting sort of tripartisan sort of consensus, and I don't think it'll be an issue. I think all of the parties are for infrastructure. I think all of the parties recognize that P3 is part of the delivery universe for infrastructure. I don't see any changes over by the election.
Thank you.
We have, I believe, 2 questions from our participants from the web.
Yes, that's right. So on their behalf, I will ask the first question. Several Canadian P3s are now in full operation. What research is being undertaken to reveal the true benefits and costs of these P3s?
That's a great question, because, you know, as the experience with P3s grows in Canada, we are starting to see more getting into what we call the concession phase, sort of post-substantial completion. You know, funny that question's asked, because one of the studies that we're in train on right now is exactly what is the best practice in concession management, right? How do you make sure that you can do all the best things, but if you don't realize the best value by using the contractual mechanisms of a P3, performance deductions, et cetera, you will not realize maximum value for money. So Greg Smith is leading with his group a study on examining a portfolio of those projects that are in operation in order to bring together sort of lessons learned and best practices that we'll intend to share with those people, but also all future projects that are getting into the concession phase. And there absolutely are lessons to learn where I'm not sure it's quite finished yet, but it's sort of, and I think it's also, if one of the conclusions I think of the study is that more work is required in that area.
The second question we've received is infrastructure investments that P3 funds are longer-term investments, and one of the long-term risks to investments with long-term horizons is climate change. This is both a risk from an operational perspective if carbon is priced, as well as impacts on the infrastructure from climate change impacts. Are projects assessed through a climate change lens?
Many of our projects have climate change benefits. We absolutely, we have 4 main criteria that we look at in assessing projects. Number 1 is public benefits. So, the project's got to achieve significant public benefits. And so the projects that we're doing, for example, in public transit have those kinds of impacts. So absolutely we're assessing public benefits. It's not a climate change fund. But we do assess those kinds of things. Also, when you see, God knows about the climactic impacts of climate change, but one of our projects, the Evan Thomas wastewater project, was being constructed in the middle of the floods last year in the Calgary area, right? And if you meet with EPCOR, they'll show you photos of much of their equipment floating down the river during the floods, and you kind of go, those people who don't understand the benefits of risk transfer, I'll just look at the photo of the stuff going down, and the government of Alberta paid no additional money. That risk was entirely the company's. And the company, I think, got a 2-week extension to the time to deliver, but that was only because the government of Alberta commandeered all their equipment to fix the roads. So, if you're in the business of sort of building infrastructure and you don't believe that there are risks, we're now transferring risk to the private sector in these kinds of areas. So that's I think, 2 major aspects that are relevant to that question.
Thanks for that, John. We actually just received another question from a webcast viewer. Is the 25% maximum commitment by the fund likely to change? What reason is there behind this number?
Well, 25% is, I'd say, unlikely to change. Why do I think it's unlikely to change? I think that the federal government is trying to get the maximum leverage for its dollars. I mean, it's always a difficult balance between fiscal restraints and the needs for infrastructure, right? And the need for infrastructure is significant. So I think we've shown over the last 5 years, in fact, we've been able to get more than 4-to-1 leverage for our dollars. Our 1.2 has gotten over 5-to-1 leverage. So if you can get 5-to-1 leverage, why not? So we've been able to achieve that. So I can't imagine that my shareholder would want me to get less leverage for my money.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, if there's no more questions, thank you, John and Tony, for answering all of those questions. Both presentations of our presenters will be posted on our website. And as John said, we are developing a lot of tools, a lot of studies, a lot of information, and that is available on our website. It also is in great demand internationally also. As an example, Poland has asked us to use some of our information and to translate it in their own language. So we do, and we do that for free. We don't charge for what we publish. But I do encourage everybody to take a look at a lot of information and to learn more about best practices and how to develop a business case, a lot in there. And also, if you have questions, you can also use our info box. People will answer your questions. So to close off, yes, this is my last annual public meeting. I'm very proud of this organization, but I'm mostly proud of the people that work in this organization, because the reason that we're successful is because of the people in this organization. They're professional, they know what they're talking about, and don't hesitate to seek their advice, because it's an excellent organization. So thank you for participating to this annual public meeting. Wish you the best. Have a great day. Thank you.